Today I'm going to show you how to use extension tubes with macro photography to get much cheaper macro photos. Sometimes when the weather's pretty bad outside, you still need to feed the photography bug. And this is a really cheap way of doing it. Now, some lenses have the word macro printed on them, but they're not actually macro lenses. They do get you a little bit closer to the subject, but not like a true macro lens. So with an actual dedicated macro lens, it has a lot of technology inside to be able to get the lens really close to small subjects. However, this technology comes at a price. So the cheaper alternative is to use extension tubes. And with extension tubes, you can go from this to this. Extension tubes basically pull the lens away from the camera, giving that lens a shorter minimum focusing distance. They normally come in a set of 2 or 3 different tubes. Some have the electronic connectors and some don't. Now you can use all of these tubes together to get as close as possible, or you can choose which one you use to get a certain minimum focusing distance. The more tubes you use, the closer the subject will be to the end of your lens. One thing I have noticed is that these kits for the Sony cameras on Amazon come in sets of 2, whereas all of the ones that I've bought from my Canon lenses come in sets of 3. The Canon ones therefore can get much closer. And this is why it's really good to shoot from a tripod for one, and also if you're using a really long extension tube, to maybe look at getting macro sliders. This is where you can just subtly adjust the camera backwards or forwards, getting closer or further away to your subject, but in minute detailed changes, so you can change it by millimeters or less. And this is critical when it comes to macro photography. The one other thing that affects how these extension tubes work with the lenses that you have is the actual minimum focusing distance of that lens before you use the extension tubes. If that minimum focusing distance of the lens that you're using is already really short, when you fit the extension tubes, you may find that the lens is almost on top of the subject. So you really need to choose wisely in what lens you use. With my 24 to 70mm, at 24mm, this is about 5mm away from the front element when I use both of the extension tubes, which is way too close. When I zoom out to 70mm, however, this focusing distance is quite far away. What I've found that works the best is a 50mm or longer focal length with a minimum focusing distance of around about 20 to 30 centimeters. What lens you use is up to you, so just experiment with what you have and I'm sure you'll be able to find a lens that works. So first of all, you want to attach your extension tubes, and it's exactly like fitting a lens. So I put the tube on the lens and then attach them to the camera. I've also side lit the scene with a big softbox. If you don't have a light, just get near to a big window that doesn't have direct sunlight shining through it. And this will give you this nice big soft light. You're going to be really close and zoomed in, so any movement will cause the frame to change drastically. So what you'll find is when you focus on your subject, only a small fraction of it will actually be in focus. The first thing that we can do to combat this is to close the aperture down. Now you don't really want to go past f16 because of diffraction. If you're not sure what diffraction is and want to learn more, click on the eye in the corner. This will take you to a video explaining this. However, at f16, that depth of focus is still quite narrow because we're so close to that subject. So the next thing to do is focus stack. Now the reason we need to focus stack when doing macro photography shots is because of that focus plane. Because the subject is so close to the lens, that focus plane is so narrow. So holding onto the camera handheld, see where that focusing point is. And then that's where you need to put your tripod. Now I've got some coins in my wallet, and I've got a few banknotes. This gives a feel to the photo of my pocket contents just being dumped out on the side. I've got the electronic connectors through the extension tubes, so I'm going to use my focusing point on the back of the camera so I can show you what I'm doing. If you have the cheaper manual extension tubes, then you just have to focus your lens manually using the focus ring. You'll do exactly as I am, but when I focus to a different point, you'll just turn that focusing ring just slightly. Once your camera is in place, turn it to manual mode. Set the aperture to f16, the ISO to 100, and then change the shutter speed to suit your lighting. Manual mode is critical to keeping the exact same exposure for every shot so they will stack more easily. Set the drive mode to self-timer 2 seconds. With these extension tubes from Neewer, they do have the connectors built in, so I can control the focus with the autofocusing system in the camera. So I'll set my focusing point to flexible spot small. Then I'll focus on the nearest point I want in focus and the furthest point I want in focus. This is just to ensure that everything of that subject will be in focus once I've stacked the shots. Once I know I can focus from the closest point to the furthest point that I want in the shot, I'll start focusing to those different points in the shot and then taking photos. Set focus to the closest part and then take a shot. Then move the focusing square up slightly, focus once again, and take the second shot. Continue this until you have all of the shots you need from the front to the back of your subject. Now the key is to touch the camera as little as possible. You just want to make sure you don't move it at all. Because it's zoomed in, it will really show any kind of movements. And this is why you have it on a self-timer. Once you have got all of those photos, you're done and it's time to bring those photos into Photoshop. I tend to put them into Lightroom and then export them from Lightroom to Photoshop and then back again. I do most of my light editing in Lightroom and all my heavy editing in Photoshop. So I've imported my photos into Lightroom and you can see I have them on the film strip at the bottom. I'm going to select all of my photos from that one stack. I'm going to right click on them and then I'm going to click on Edit In and Edit as Layers in Photoshop. Then all I need to do is wait for Photoshop to open all of the images in a layer stack. Once they've opened up in Photoshop, go to your Layers panel and select all layers. Next you want to click on Edit and Auto Align Layers. What this does is align your subject. If there's not too much movement between the frames, it should align them really well. If this doesn't work, you may have to go back and shoot the subject again. But that's the beauty with macro photography. You'll normally have a setup at home and then you'll have your laptop. So you can tether or you can just send your images to your laptop, edit them, and if it doesn't work, you can go back to your camera. Next, you want to blend the layers together. So click on Edit, Auto Blend Layers, and then Stack Layers. Photoshop should then stack all of these together, just showing you the parts that are in focus. If you look at the Layers panel, you'll see it's masked out the parts that it thinks that are out of focus. If you have brought your photos across from Lightroom, now it's time to save your image. Press Command S or Control S if you're on a PC. This should then save the image and send it back to Lightroom. Once I'm back in Lightroom, I'll do all of my editing, I'll tweak and tune the shot to exactly how I want it, and then I'll export it. If you want to learn more about editing in Lightroom, click on the eye in the corner. I have a couple of tutorials on that subject. If you're not sure about Photoshop, don't worry too much. It seems more intimidating than it actually is. You just want to do small projects like this and just learn small things at a time. Then after a while, you'll realize that you've learned a lot more and you know the program and you can use it with confidence. I do have a video on the most useful things for photographers in Photoshop. Click on the eye in the corner and that'll give you a link to this video. And that's about it. Extension tubes are a really cheap way of getting into macro photography. Like I've already said, if you really enjoy doing this and want to really get into it properly, it would be worth buying a macro photography lens. However, if you just want to do it every now and then, or it's just a hobby or a side part to your hobby, extension tubes are the way to go. And with a bit of patience and time, you can build a stack of photos and get some really nice looking macro shots. Now, have you tried macro photography? Have you used extension tubes or have you got a dedicated macro lens? It'll be great to hear how you guys have got on with macro photography. As always, if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. And for weekly tutorials, hints and tips in photography and videography, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you next time.